Oh my God.
We gotta go.
Go ahead. We live.
Listen,
Oh my God.
there he is.
Dude, we're like the Four
We live.
Stooges. Okay,
We
this guy
live,
just
Water.
went live. All right. So anyway, I told him not to go live. Everyone,
Oh,
welcome.
I didn't hear
Anyway,
that.
I
Did y'all
told
hear
him.
that one?
I told him don't go live, but here we are anyway. So welcome to
Fire.
another.
Did you hear that? Win, did you hear that?
Yeah,
did
they
not.
heard it. They
Oh, I
heard it.
didn't hear that.
Anyway,
My bad.
anyway. So welcome to another episode of the Four Elements. Today, I'm your host. I'm Water.
I'm Earth.
I'm Fire.
And I win.
And you can see we're so disorganized, so uncoordinated, so sloppy. I mean, it's ridiculous. So if you're watching this right now, get your laughs on because there's just going to be more sloppiness going on today. And I think that this was done intentionally because, they're trying to make me look bad. That's really what it is. Or I mean, if we really broke it down, that's really what's going on. But today, on a serious note, we have a good show. We got a good show topic. And this is something that has come up quite a bit in pop culture. It's come up in relationships, intimate relationships, family relationships. It's just come up a lot. And we want to talk today about toxic masculinity versus conscious masculinity. So the topic of toxic masculinity is the one that comes up a lot. Conscious masculinity, not so often. Some people may be actually wondering, like, what in the world is conscious masculinity? Because we hear about toxic masculinity so much. But what I want to do is I want to kick it off by actually asking the elements. What is toxic masculinity? We can start with Win because he's got that smile on his face, like, yo, he's like, yo, I got something for that. So
I actually do not right now. I expected you to have something and kick it off.
I'm gonna come back to it. But what comes to mind for you when you hear toxic masculinity?
When I think about it, I think about guys fronting on each other, trying to punk each other. Hang on just for a second. That's what comes to mind. What comes to mind is men, mistreating women. What comes to mind is just acting other than self, in public and private. Just acting a damn fool, to be quite frank with you.
Got it. Fire. What about you? Or the Win hit the nail on the head? Or are you like, you know what? That's not really what comes to mind for me.
I will expound on it. I had this conversation before in my ultimate team group with some of the brothers, and one of my brothers, Madi, if you watch it, Madi made a distinction that I'm aligned with, right? And the distinction is that there's no such thing as toxic masculinity in his mind, and I agree. I'm expounding upon that in a second. No such thing as toxic masculinity because masculinity is not inherently toxic. Like in his mind, you can't be masculine or considered masculine if you're operating in any toxicity. So, however, when I hear the word toxic masculinity, I think about ego. That's the thing I think about first and foremost is the presence of ego. I think about the absence of consciousness. And I think about a man who is undisciplined, a man who is emotionally unintelligent, a man who is ruled by his human faculties and ultimately his ego. So that's how I would describe it. You just using the two words, putting them together. But I think I have a new frame for masculinity. I really think that, in order for a man to exude or operate in masculinity, that he is inherently not toxic. He is inherently conscious. So that's my take on it. What you got, Earth?
Well, like when I hear toxic masculinity, I mean it's is one who, when you go into a space and you're able to like totally disrupt that space, period, wherever the space is. You go in there and you just flip it upside down with, your way of being. You go in there, you just go into this arena, go into this group of people, and everybody's kind of chilling, and you just come in there and you just totally disrupt it. To me, that's toxic masculinity, in a nutshell. I think that, I listen to what you said. Your friend told you that inherently that doesn't exist, but I believe that it does exist. In my opinion, the the um, the execution of, slavery was toxic masculinity. You know, I think that was very toxic in how, people were treated. In any form of slavery where people are abused, anywhere where where abuse exists, there's toxicity. I don't think that, men are inherently abusive. Like, I just don't think people are inherently abusive. I think that's something that somewhere along the line they adopt from somewhere. Who knows where it comes from for some people, but I think their view of life actually gives rise to how they walk through life and how they behave, how they treat others. It's just how they view life based upon their life experiences. And sometimes two people can have the same life experiences and totally go on two separate paths. One could go on the path of destruction, and the other can go on the path of love and care and admiration. So I think there is a such thing as toxicity, or is it um, uh, toxic masculinity? Definitely.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I got about that. That's what I have about that for now.
Man, wow. So three different perspectives, three unique perspectives, but I think that all of those are valid. And so, as a tribute to Earth, last week, I think that he set the bar really, really high. If you didn't see last week's show on Are You an Alpha Male, Beta Male, or Simp? Great show that we had last week. But what he did is he did research, which kind of threw me off because I thought we were going to get on here and spitball. But this guy came like Earth, you came prepared, man. So, since I'm hosting the show this week, I figured, hey, look, this guy can't outdo me. Like I have to step my game up or whatnot. And so I actually did the research on what toxic masculinity is, and there are quite a few different definitions out there. Kind of as everyone heard, like you can hear the elements have different ideas of what toxic masculinity is. And look, I'm about to read a definition, but at the end of the day, this is a mashup of. This is kind of a condensed version of different definitions that I've seen out on the net and people were describing. But toxic masculinity refers to ideas about the way that men should behave, and it involves the extreme pressure some men may feel to act in a way that is actually harmful either to themselves or to others. Okay? So toxic masculinity has three core components: toughness, anti-femininity, and power. Okay. So the toughness aspect is the notion that men should be physically strong, emotionally callous, and behaviorally aggressive. So that's what the toughness aspect of toxic masculinity is. The anti-femininity, this one's pretty simple. We see it a lot. This involves the idea that men should reject anything considered to be feminine, such as showing emotions or accepting help. And then there's the power aspect, or the power component of it, which this basically is the assumption that men must work toward obtaining power and status, whether it be social or financial, so that they can gain the respect of others.
Ooh.
I know that's
Whoa.
a lot. I know that's a lot. And I know there's going to be some disagreements here. And listen, if you're on the stream and you don't agree with this definition, then look, we want to hear your comments on that too. But let me kick it back out to the elements now that I've read the definition or the mashup of the definitions that I found. And let me hear what you guys have now. Who wants to kick it off?
So
Earth wants to. Earth is like, look, give me this.
I'll kick it off.
All right.
Now, based upon a definition, what it brought me to is there's a time and a place for everything. During times of war, I see absolutely positively nothing wrong with that definition at all. Nothing. Because in order to succeed in war, all those qualities have to be there, or you will quickly be defeated. Now, during times of peace, that's like fitting, a square peg into a round hole. It doesn't fit during times of peace, but during times of war, those are the dudes who you want fighting with you. Period. Those are the dudes who you want to be your soldiers. So from that perspective, yeah, it's a time. I look at it now as a time and a place. So maybe, and we'll see by the end of this stream, maybe, just maybe, Fires, what he said, his when his boys said about toxic masculinity, this toxic masculinity is not being something that is so, then maybe I might start leaning on that side, because there's a time and a place for everything. So who knows? We'll see. We'll see.
I'm gonna jump in because I think it dovetails to what Earth just said, and my boy Madi's point. So when you look at masculinity, somebody watching, go get masculinity out the dictionary, and what you'll read is that its qualities or attributes regarded as characteristics of men. And so from the disposition or context of somebody who doesn't perceive somebody who's not disciplined, not emotionally intelligent, as that's not being a man. So how could there be toxic masculinity if these qualities or characteristics are ascribed to you being a man when you're actually in fact not being a man in the world? But when we deal with toxic masculinity as defined by Lou, I would have to agree with you, Earth, in that we see it in the world. We don't just see it in the world. Let's make it personal. We see it in ourselves. If we keep it in a stat, we see it within ourselves. There's times where we turn this way of being on. I quite frankly wouldn't have described them as toxic masculinity. I wouldn't describe my pursuits of financial abundance, my pursuits of social equity, my pursuits of power, or me being rigid with regards to my goals as aggression and strong as something that is toxic. And I'm careful. What I'm conscious of is I'm being mindful right now in this conversation not to label toxic masculinity as something that's negative, because you think about guys beating women, you think about guys mentally, physically, psychologically, just dogging women out. That's toxic masculinity, but that wasn't actually implied in the definition. I took notes and I'm writing down these attributes and I'm going, I don't see the problem, guy. I don't see the problem until it's appropriated or it plays out in certain contexts. So, man, I'm like you, Earth. I'm taking a step back, and I'm just being with the conversation as it unfolds, because there are various opinions, there are various definitions, and I don't know where I am right now. I'm kind of just hanging out with it. What you got? What you got, Win?
So what I heard was what came to my mind was extraordinary, like peer pressure. So like in the locker room, when you're playing football, guys might, press other guys to do certain things or act in a particular way. And in that manner, if it's an extreme pressure, then it could be regarded as toxic. Or for example, like you're in the military and you're with a bunch of guys and, let's say, you're in the Middle East and all the other guys are, just shooting civilians at random, and they press somebody else to do the same thing. That's regarded as toxic, right? You get what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and so here's the conundrum, okay? You know, you heard the definition, and that's the pretty much the book definition, if you will, of what toxic masculinity is, right? And I wanted to read that because look, that's what's out there. When you looking up toxic masculinity, when you go look it up now, you'll see that that's kind of, you know, it's kind of borderline, like, wait a minute, like, whoa, you know, what are we talking about here? However, if you get back into what Wynn was just saying, you know, that extreme pressure that you start feeling, then we start to get into how it leads into what are called harmful imbalances and someone trying to live up to these expectations that they're being pressured to live into. Okay. So some examples of that, which gets more into the toxicity, is aggression, sexual aggression or sexual control, showing no emotion or suppressing emotions, hypercompetitiveness, needing to dominate or control others, a tendency towards or glorification of violence.
Yeah. So what makes it toxic is like a group think. Like you have to act and think and behave in a particular manner just to fit in, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
you
Actually, water froze real quick, but we just let's roll it. Let's roll it.
Yeah, of course.
we'll keep going. This is what happens when you got Magic Jack. When you got Magic Jack for your internet connection, it's shoddy sometimes.
Yep.
You heard that? You heard that?
Yeah. It's look. So we're gonna be full of technical difficulties today or whatnot. So we're gonna
fine.
work
Just
through
keep flowing.
Yeah, we're gonna work through it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that pressure is going to be what actually, you know, that's going to be what puts people into the, you know, into that toxicity. But what do you guys think about that flowing from the definition into those attributes that I was talking about?
So I don't know if you heard, but you know, as you were leaving, what I was saying is it's more attributed to like a group think.
Yeah, no, I heard that. I was just wanting
Okay.
to know Earth and Fire, like what they thought about that.
Yeah.
I'm hanging out with it because I'm trying to associate groupthink with. When you say groupthink, you're saying the general consensus of the way a male should act in certain situations is given by other males.
So this is what I'm saying. I know myself as a male, as a man, right?
Yeah.
But I'm also a part of these elements, right? And if all three of you guys have a particular view of something and want to put pressure on me to think the same way and behave the same way, then it could be regarded as toxic. Because I'm not, when I take on that group think, I'm not acting on my own accord. I'm not acting as I think. You understand?
Yeah.
For myself, I'm not acting as self. I'm acting in the manner in which you expect me and want me to act, and it might be absolutely in opposition to what my morals, my values, my principles are.
Okay.
And if I take that on, you know, that it could be regarded as toxic for me and toxic.
Thank you for the clarification. So let me also ask then, is it then possible for a man to be operating in toxic masculinity or a state of toxic masculinity out of his own volition without the influence of a group, a crowd, a dominant thought stream from some social group he belongs to? Can a man still be operating as a toxic masculine just because he's fucking toxic?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's going to happen. And it's a learned behavior, whether we just learn it and, you know, like as men, as whether we learn it from someone else or we just learn it by kind of being a manipulative individual. You definitely can do that. And let me read a summary because it sums up what Wind is talking about with this group think. It's a summary of pretty much what like it's almost like a like the definition, but then it kind of expands upon everything we're talking about how it is. So it goes back to what's causing this whole toxicity, if you will. So toxic masculinity is not only a set of behaviors, but a set of expectations, often enforced through violence and intimidation. It is the force that causes men to be extremely emotionally repressed. The thing that causes them to not seek medical or psychiatric help, even if they desperately need it out of fear of being perceived as weak, or because the idea of needing help at all is considered feminine and a weakness. It is a necessary component to understand that men are victims of toxic masculinity as much as they are perpetrators. And these two sides go hand in hand. Men are not allowed to express emotions other than anger, and to need help or to ask for it or to seek genuine connection with others. So yes. that is pretty much what, like what Wind is encompassing, is just saying that it's a group think, and it just becomes an echo chamber of, like anything, like that any of that toxic behavior becomes, you become an outcast if you don't participate in it almost.
All of us have adversely been impacted by toxic masculinity. And I'm gonna give you an example. They could say that hip hop or video games could be the causation of toxic masculinity. The gangster rap, calling women out of their names. It's all been, a part of our culture. And, people don't have to bear down on you and, sit down over you to tell you that this is how it should be. But because it's been echoed for such a long time through media, through rap, through hip hop, through TV, through all sorts of technology, it's impacted us in some way, shape, or form.
Absolutely.
So just thought about something when you were speaking, Win. So would you? This is something just to know for a second. Would you say that women have contributed to toxic masculinity?
Absolutely.
In the form of the type of men they say they want.
Absolutely.
This guy didn't even listen to the whole question.
Because I know that women have
answered the question before you even.
And it goes back to our conversation about, last week. We talked about, last week I said that women want alpha men, but at the end of the day, they settle for beta men.
Okay, so anyone who hasn't seen our, alpha beta simp video, that was last week. I think what we can do is we can post that somewhere in the chats or somewhere up here in the top corner.
Yeah, so we can post that somewhere up in the top corner, and we'll do that. The link we'll post a link there for you all so you all can see it.
Yeah.
So let me just continue about what I was saying is that when we are acclimated to a particular way of being, oftentimes we are so comfortable in that way of being that we often expect that all the time. And so that's what I was saying about women love bad boys. They love alpha men. They love leaders. They love strong men. They love dominant men. And so, of course, what the question that you asked, Earth, the answer is yes. I mean, we've all been participants in toxic masculinity.
Ooh, not me. Not claiming that. I'm not claiming that. Win.
You couldn't have played football or grew up in a way you grew up at if you didn't participate in that in some way, form, or fashion?
I will say this. I'm kidding. Of course I have. And I think that toxic masculinity, as it's defined and described today, is pervasive. I would say that it is the dominant way of being amongst maledom. And this conversation is important because the conversation brings light and consciousness to the distinction. And for the ladies who are watching, the ladies who will watch, I hope that you get present to the fact or reality that you just might be in a relationship with a toxic masculine. For the brothers who are watching and will watch, I hope that you get present to the fact that where you have in fact been behaving inside of a toxic masculine framework. One of the frameworks that I want to spin around the horn to the brothers and ask the question is, so by definition, does a man who dogs out his woman or cheats on his woman, maybe he's not an overt dog in terms of how he treats her, but he cheats on her, he sleeps around, and that's not the agreement that they have, right? And his reasoning and rationale behind that is that that's just what men do. When he was raised by a bunch of OGs, old heads who, validated his maleness by, getting some stink finger or having sex at an extraordinarily young age. Would that be an example of toxic masculinity at play that we see that is pervasive?
Absolutely. And we big it up all the time. Yo, you hit that? You hit Shorty? Oh, man.
Yeah. So that's just the world of toxic masculinity, right? So this is a great conversation. However, this conversation, this show is not about toxic masculinity. It is about toxic masculinity versus conscious masculinity. And I'm going to be real honest that, listen, if you're in the world of, hits and impressions and, like numbers, the amount of things that come up when you search for toxic masculinity are massive and enormous, gigantic compared to when you look at conscious masculinity. I'm going to tell you like this. There is no definition for conscious masculinity. At least I didn't find one. So maybe somebody else is, Earth is our resident researcher here. So maybe he found something, but I'm telling you, like, it's very, very slim pickings out there. And, but before I get to, the definition that I found, what I want to do is I want to kick it back to the elements so we can shift from toxicity to conscious masculinity. And we started with wind on the last one, earth. What comes to mind for you, man, when we talk about conscious masculinity?
For me, conscious masculinity is, the ability to exhibit power and not force. Because, you can, when you exhibit power, you can choose when to exhibit force. But when you exhibit force, you can never choose power. It's always force, always. And so being able to exhibit power, then you know when to apply force. And that force may sometimes look like toxic masculinity, or it may look toxic, but it's needed for the given situation. And so it's to me, it's knowing when you're sitting in a seat of power, and you're always sitting in that seat of power. And then you can actually choose force when it's needed. And then you're able to turn it off and on. You don't have to exist in the state of force on a consistent basis. And so that's just my brief definition from my perspective.
Whoa. Woo. Whoever has to follow that up, good luck. Good luck.
Shit.
Look, fire. We're gonna get you back. We're gonna let you, keep it safe for work, fire, man. No profanity, baby. Next up, you're next up.
All right, no profanity. So that goes back to the definition of what we were talking about earlier. The way you describe toxic masculinity before we expounded upon it is closely aligned with what you just said. Mm-hmm. So ultimately, it's two sides of the same coin. And the ability to choose is based on awareness. The ability to choose, number one, is based on awareness. You have to know that you have an option. If you're not aware that you have an option in terms of your way of being, you're operating by default. To me, you're operating by ego, and something else is running the show. Maybe it's peer pressure or what you believe, or the ideologies about maleness are running the show. So I would agree. The ability to choose. So for me, to me, that's masculinity. I go back to my initial statement. Like my boy Madi said. To me, you have grown men and you have grown boys in grown man bodies in terms of their consciousness, in terms of their mentality. And so to me, that's not a man. You don't get to be a man from my disposition just because of your age, just because you're over 18 or because you're over 21 or because you got hair, below the belt. Like that doesn't make you a man. To me, Earth always said, man, show me a man who uses force and I'll show you a man who has no power. The guy who uses force is not being a man. He's not operating in masculinity. So I go back to my initial disposition on this whole conversation because I don't perceive a male who has reached the age of adulthood as a man. You are a male who has reached the age of adulthood. Unless you have the power to choose and you're conscious of that power to choose when to assert power in times of war, or if you're a professional athlete, right? Or you're charging forth towards a specific goal and you don't want to be delayed, detoured, set back from whatever that goal is. I get that. So I rest my case on this conscious masculinity. Conscious masculinity to me is just masculinity. Bottom line, that's just masculinity. So anybody watching who, just because you come of age, I'm a man, Gina. Nah, not necessarily. You are a grown male. That's what you are. You might be a grown boy in a grown man body, but you might not. You're not a man yet, in my opinion. Wind?
Yeah, so going back to groupthink and expounding upon what you said, Earth and Fire, the toxic masculinity essentially is operating on animal instinct. It's operating as a function of your environment and the people around you, which is typically, for the most part, has been the lower self. Conscious masculinity, like you said, is being aware and being conscious and actually being having the wherewithal and ability to stand above that lower instinct, that lower animalistic instinct, and actually using your damn brain and standing on principles and values and something bigger than yourself.
Yeah. Hey, let me jump back in there because I wanna just to build on what Wayne is saying, because I think it's important to understand that as I'm listening to you, when awareness is key, but it's only the genesis of masculinity, because there's a lot of dudes who know good and damn well how they get down is not fly. So the awareness has to be accompanied by a desire to transform or change or be a different way that works, and that is aligned with your truest or highest self versus your lower self, as you described. When next, after you have awareness and desire to change or transform or show up or be a different way, is the knowledge or know-how to cause said transformation to occur. Now, once you have the awareness, the desire to change, I'm convicted. My higher self is not aligned with this get down. Like, I know it's wrong and I don't like it. I want to change it. Boom, the knowledge. Now I actually know how to move past this shift, create a new realm of possibility and being for myself. How do I put an infrastructure in place so that I'm holding myself accountable and I'm reinforcing these new principles that I believe in? And I begin to create a new circle, a new dynamic. I will be authentic and share that you four guys in the last 11 years since we've been brothers, since the work we did together, is that group of conscious masculinity for me. Because of the way you think, it's a higher self modality. You don't allow me to operate in my lower selves. You call me out. right away, like, yo, bro, that shit's not. That mess is trifling, right? On the spot. And so I created leveraging this network and this group think thing. I created a group, subconsciously created groups of conscious masculine males, and the closest people to me are conscious masculines. All the people in my inner circle today are conscious masculines. I gotta give y'all some kudos and some credit for that, man. So y'all are a part of the reinforcement and the accountability piece. So awareness is there, desire is there, knowledge. We have tools and distinctions that we can shift from some stuff that's not working to some stuff that's working. But the accountability and the reinforcement comes from community. So thank you.
That's a fact. Word. Likewise. Let me just say this one thing real quick, too.
Definitely
Just to bring it down to earth for the people, right? So at the end of the day, when we talk about consciousness, we talk about like what is the outcome that we really want at the end of the day. And if our outcome is to be at a high level and to have happiness and health and wealth, what are the actions that we need to do to be in alignment with that expectation? What's the behavior? What's the everyday thinking that needs to be in alignment with that? Anything else is toxic. It's whack.
That's your mic drop?
Yeah, I guess so. Like, he just, I was waiting for something else. Like,
next time we just do this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and this is what the elements are about. For anyone who is just stumbling upon us, this should have been our first show, because what the elements started out the show for is to not participate in the trash bin of what the internet is these days. Not to participate in what social media, what's popping on social media, what's hot on the news, what makes headlines, what makes clickbait wind, and all of those things. we're just not about that. And collectively, we have formed up as a unit to have these conversations. And so this all started out just as a conference call that we used to have early mornings, Saturday mornings. It was just a lot of conference calls, and we just thought, why not bring these kinds of conversations to people? And as Fire said, look, I can vouch for you guys. You're the three that's in the inner circle of people that I know that I can talk to about things that I may not be able to talk to some of my other friends about, just because they're not interested. And that doesn't make them less my friends. It just means that I have a unit of people, namely the four elements, that I can come to, and we can have conversations that will allow me to get some distinction around what I am being. Maybe I am being toxic, and they just call me out and say, hey, Water, that's pretty, like come on, man. And they just we may have a conversation like that.
That's right.
So good conversation. I'm sure all the other elements will say, hey, listen, yes, just like Fire said, and just like I'm saying, like, this is the circle of consciousness that we want to promote, and these are the types of conversations we want to have, because I think that this is the stuff that's not really being talked about. Look, I couldn't even go Google it yourself. This show probably comes up number one for conscious masculinity. That shows you how little. Look, we just create something new, and it's like, number one on Google for conscious masculinity. So it just shows you how little is talked about. Earth, what are you hearing over there, man? I can see your wheels spinning.
No, I'm just listening really and taking it in. I really agree, like with Fire, having like a core group of people who are there, who can actually hold you accountable. And the key is you have to want to be held accountable. If you don't want to be held accountable, you're going to be in your feelings all the time, because when you get called out on your stuff, it's not like, hey, guess what? You might want to. No, it's like, dude, that's blah. There's some expletives that come behind that, and come behind it, in the middle of it, and in front of it. And so you have to be willing to want to be held accountable. If you're not, and you have to be willing to like really take a look at yourself, and not be under the microscope of your own from your own perspective, but being under the microscope of others who can actually see how you show up. Excuse me, who can actually see how you show up in the world. And usually, how we show up in the world sometimes is not how we think we show up in the world.
Right.
And so you have to be willing to be under the microscope of others and get yourself out of the way, and just allow that to happen. Just be under that microscope and be willing to take everything that's being said. So, for example, what I do is I take everything that's being said as what's so until it's not. To me, it's that simple. I don't evaluate. I don't say, well, maybe sort of, kind of, sort of, possibly. No, that's the view of someone else of me. Like that's their view of me, or their view of my actions, or whatever that is. So I'm going to take that as what is so until it's not so. But the bottom line is you have to be willing to be held accountable. That is the key. That is the key. All right. That's all I got on that one.
And who
Can I
wants
add?
that? Who
Can I
wants
add?
to be held accountable? Yeah, go ahead, Fire.
To that point, Water, that is exactly where I was going to go, because inside of that accountability, like before you can even get to that point, you have to be willing to get naked. You have to be willing to be authentic. You have to be willing to tell the truth.
Hold on. Unwrap that term naked, because like so just so the the elementals out there know that as elements, we have our own language and we have our own internal speak. We have our own jargon that we kick around and throw around, that we've developed over a decade, that we've been just kind of doing this behind the scenes or whatnot. So unwrap what naked is for the elementals out there in the audience.
So those of you elementals who are also teammates, because I use the language inside of the Ultimate Team group. But for those who don't know, being naked is a function of being transparent. That's telling the raw, unscripted, undoctored truth. It's the truth about what happened, meaning the facts about what actually transpired, but it's also how you feel about it, or how it made you feel. It is a holistic sharing of what's so from your perspective, without
now,
any
hold on.
Yeah.
Let me just interject right there. So now you heard him use the word feelings, right? So that was one of the things that was very, very specific in the definition of toxic masculinity that is not allowed. Okay. So rewind that back and make sure that you emphasize the how you feel about it, because this is an important thing when it comes to conscious masculinity.
Man, great distinction, bro. Because we do. I take for granted that these things are second nature to us at this juncture. But you're right. The conscious masculine man is very cognizant of how a situation makes him feel. He's very conscious of where the triggers. He's conscious of his triggers. He's cognizant of his traumas and where they got started. And so he's very mindful of how he feels. Believe it or not, in order to be a conscious man, it's a necessary evil. But what I want to do is give you this, because we talk about these frameworks. I'll restate the framework, and then I want to give you a distinction or a tool to shift. The framework that I gave you, if you were listening, and some of you are taking notes because you're just students of life, is the ADKAR framework, ADKAR. I talked about awareness. I talked about desire, right? I talked about knowledge to shift or change. I talked about accountability. And I talked about reinforcement. So it's a 5-step model. One of the things that we've done and that we do frequently, is we're talking right now, is the getting naked, or is a clearing. It's a telling the truth that needs to occur within your group. Now, if you're a male and you're a masculine, or you're a male and you're watching this, you have to be very intentional about the group that you create. So this is some homework, man. Listen, to Water's point, you don't typically us men don't want to be held accountable, so we don't want to be around a bunch of do-gooder dudes. But be mindful. The thing that we do here is that there's a distinction between my lower self and my higher self that these three guys are aware of. So as you're building your conscious masculine tribe, make sure that they are aware of the distinction between your lower self and your higher self. One of the things that we did early in our time together is that we start Jedi mind tricking ourselves, and we started acting like we really wanted something, right? So I can't get into details, but there's some of us who were acting like we really wanted something that we were choosing powerfully that was toxic as heck. Right? Like we all knew that job was toxic, but it was like, no, man, I'm choosing this is what I want. This is what I want to do. I want to get this out of my system and rah, 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 right? It's like we all sat back and said, I don't care what you saying, bro. That's some bull mess. That's some bull mess. But you go ahead, get that out your system. But just know that because you want to do your get down, that the ripple effect or the impact on all these other people that you're pulling into this toxic cycle of masculinity, there's going to be an impact there. Do you still choose to go down that path? And eventually that path course corrected itself. It took a couple years, huh, Earth? I'm not saying
it definitely wasn't Earth. Yeah,
it definitely wasn't Earth.
Yeah.
It took a couple of years to cycle it out.
But we was here for it.
Yeah.
So again, this distinguish toxic your lower self from your. So this group has to distinguish your lower self from your higher self. So that's integrity, and they need to hold you accountable to your higher self at all times, right? So that's just one thing you could do to start off as you're building this village, this tribe. You guys got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I do. Like I said, just to be granular and just everyday, just down to earth type thing. If you're in a relationship, for example, you're with your lady, you're with your wife, is what I'm saying, you have to ask yourself, is what I'm saying, is how I'm communicating going to get me to the result that I want, is a happy relationship, a happy marriage? Do I want my kids to be adversely impacted by my communication? You know, is my behavior in alignment with, those goals? If I'm trying to build $1 million in my portfolio, is going to get that Birkin bag, is that in alignment with that?
Come on, man.
And listen, we're listening to a guy who has some serious financial training, so you might want to listen to those analogies right there. Keep going, Wayne.
I mean, is buying that new Mercedes, is that in alignment with, my expectation to have this nice house with my family? You could talk about me. Is eating that ho-ho, that Twinkie, in alignment with being healthy, right? And if that answer is no, then you have to do the opposite. That's just the bottom line. Do what is in alignment with what you ultimately want. And that's it. And that'll take you far. It's really easy. We just make it hard.
I like it. And the conscious masculine is something that I don't know if just society doesn't really pay attention to, or it's just not talked about, or maybe for some people they don't even know it's possible. But Carl Jung actually used the traditions of the East and the West, and he used those to describe the psyche or the soul, however you want to describe it. And he basically said it's a compromise of both masculine and feminine, each with their own characteristics necessary for personal and collective healing, growth, and empowerment. So I think Carl Jung really, gave a framework for us to think about how do we want to develop ourselves as a masculine, right? You don't have to be toxic. And for me, I look at conscious masculinity as a tool, right? You're being aware of your masculinity, but you're embracing it, and you're using your masculinity as a tool to develop yourself as a human being. Because most of us grow up with some aspect of toxic masculinity. We already talked about that. And it's more of a journey of evolving from the toxic masculine or that toxicity to becoming something that's more than that, whatever you want to call that. What do you guys think about that?
I love it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. Um, and as you were speaking, what I thought about was what would it take to get there? Like that's what I was thinking about. I've been thinking about that um, as all three of you all were speaking, and it takes something to get there. It is that journey is not for the faint of heart by no stretch of the imagination. Because on that journey, you have to be willing to like dismantle everything about yourself that you think about yourself, that you know about yourself. You have to really be willing to untangle all of that. And you it's not possible to start from scratch, but in the process of dismantling that, you have to be willing to be, as we stated earlier, like be under the microscope and say, this works, this doesn't work. This works, this doesn't work. Oh no, this definitely doesn't work at all. And be willing to push aside the things that don't work and embrace the things that do work about yourself. But it takes something, because the the easiest, most powerful computer to program is the human brain. The most difficult computer to reprogram is the human brain. It is very difficult. Like that's why I said it takes something to act. And what I mean by it takes something, it takes you being willing to be knocked down. It takes you being willing to be embarrassed. It takes you, being willing to, as Fire stated earlier, to be naked, so to speak. It takes you willing to be all of those things, because those things, usually a lot of things that don't work about us are things that we've been nurtured. It's our nurturing, so to speak. The things we've been taught. But we were all, born into this lifetime as something or someone, and that's our nature. And it's always a constant fight. And I always call it like nature versus nurture. And for most of us, our nurturing wins, because our nurturing says you have to be tough. Our nurturing says you can't cry. Our nurturing says you can't show emotions. We've been nurtured to be that way. And our nature says, well, that might be who I am. There's nothing wrong with that. But our nurturing always suffocates our nature. And that's why we can never be the fullness of who we've come here to be, ever. Because we operate so frequently out of our nurturing. And our three primary institutions actually reinforce our nurturing. And that's our governmental institutions, educational institutions, and our religious institutions. They all three reinforce and greatly influence our nurturing. And we end up being like domesticated like animals, like cows or like dogs or whatever. And we're just like that. So I would say just, be willing to allow yourself to allow your brain to be dismantled, allow your thinking to be totally dismantled. And it's, and at times it's a scary place to be, because all of your thinking, all of your points of view, that's our foundation. But we have to be willing to dismantle all of that. It doesn't mean all of it has to go away. Just the things that don't work have to go away. Or you choose at the end of the day. You choose. So yeah, that's all I got.
And some of us need masterminds. Some of us need counselors. Some of us need,
Therapy.
friends. Yeah.
Yeah.
But whatever you need, go get it. And the beautiful thing about life is that it's always providing us with feedback. You know, if we're having a hard time, we're doing something that's not in alignment with our highest goals. And if you just listen to that feedback, if you just pay attention instead of stifling it, you know, your life will be much better.
I'm gonna try to do this in 60 seconds, guys. Wish me luck. Wish me luck. Earth pointed to a distinction that I want to make sure you all pick up, which is, you know, we operate from the domain of morality, which is largely given by our parental primordial relationships, as well as our religious institutions and governmental institutions, and all the institutions, school, education, all the institutions he just laid out. And so we live this good or bad type of lifestyle. And what happens is when you are judging yourself, shaming yourself, guilting yourself, the ego will do anything to ensure its survival and its dominance in your life. And so I would encourage you to shift from right or wrong, good or bad, to working or not working. This works or it doesn't work. What that does is it helps you get present to, helps you have this remarkable relationship with reality. Because the eye in the sky don't lie, as they say in football, right? You can check the tape and see how it's going. If it ain't going, if it's not going according to plan, fam, you might want to call an audible, as we would say in sports. Okay, so try on right, working or not working, versus right or wrong, good or bad. All right, I've been doing this for years. It works. The next thing is, why conscious masculinity? I wrote this down. Why? So people watch it like, why is this a thing? Why should it be something that I pursue? I'm gonna give you a quick share. Hopefully the guys can share in a minute as well. Conscious masculinity for me is in alignment with my highest self. It is what it means to be in integrity. It is where I find I have access to the most power, the most freedom, the most full self-expression, and the most peace of mind in all of my existence of 40 years. When I am in integrity with my highest self. So for me, conscious masculinity is the goal, and it is an evolution. It is a constant perpetual state or pursuit for me. But the other way just doesn't work. If I'm keeping it a thou wow, it doesn't work. I messed up. I don't want to keep making the same mistakes again. Brothers.
So we have we're running out of time. So that we're gonna use that as Fire's closing comments. And I want Earth and Win. I want you two to, you know, give us some closing comments as well, so that we can wrap that right at about an hour, so that we can give everybody their evening back.
Yeah. So, you know, my closing comments are just, you know, you have to be willing to request or to say that this is what I want. Not say it to yourself. You have to be willing to say it to others. This is who I want. This is what I want for myself, whatever that is. And saying that to people who you know are not always agreeable with you. You're saying it to people who you know will not be a yes man or a yes woman, because those people are going to just let you slide. You know, it has to be people who themselves walk through life and hold themselves accountable, hold others accountable. You know, if you're going to get somewhere, you're not going to be able to sort of transform yourself by yourself to yourself. That's just not going to happen at all. It has to be in the context of group. It has to exist there. If it doesn't exist there, it's not going to happen. I don't really care how much you do, how much thinking you do, how much meditating you do, how much concentrating you do. If you are not out sharing with others what you desire for yourself, what you're up to in life, it is not going to happen. I promise you it won't. You may see a little bit of headway, but you will never get where you want to be if you're not willing to do that. And so that's all I got.
And the last thing I want to say is just do whatever it takes to make yourself healthy, do whatever it takes to make yourself happy, do whatever it takes to make yourself wealthy. That's it. Whatever it takes.
I love it. Short and sweet. And for me, what I would say is, listen, conscious masculinity is simply the journey of harnessing your true masculine energy. And to me, that's what sums up. That sums up everything that all the elements have been saying this entire show. Is just that when you're embarking, when you want to become a conscious masculine, you're just going to have to undertake the journey, and you're going to have to learn how to harness your true masculine energy. And there will be stumbles. You will get back into toxicity that we've all been programmed with, but it's about having that community, as Earth and Fire were talking about. You have that community around you, then you can actually utilize it. This has been a great show. Thank you all for dealing with our, I guess, with our technical difficulties. We are still just new at this. This is our third show, so there will be more technical difficulties that we will experience. And we just want to say thank you in advance for sticking with us, enjoying the content. We do this for you. So if you haven't already, like, subscribe, join. Here are all of our social media handles, so you can basically find us in all of these places. And definitely, we'd love to hear some feedback. If you subscribe and you're actually, if you like our Facebook page, then you will get the notification when we do these live streams. Typically, we do them every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. So, just tune in then. And if we're having technical difficulties, it may be 8:15, it may be 8:30, but we will get there. Trust me, we're in the back scenes scrambling, trying to figure it out. Next week, we have a wonderful show, and the show is going to be about what we love about women. So please do not miss that show, because that's going to be an awesome show where we talk all about our favorite subject, women. Until then, this is the Four Elements, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Same time, same place.
Peace.
Peace.
Later.